sure Keir
That's
will have
nothing
taken
to
that
do with
judgment.
Keir Starmer not telling us that this could well have been a terror incident. It didn't stop him in 2017, for example, when he tweeted about the Finsbury Park bombing and saying then that it was a terror attack. That's nothing to do with the court case, is it?
Well, the point that I've made is that Keir has to take a judgment, as any Prime Minister would do, about the importance of protecting that prosecution.
But it didn't impact the prosecution. We've gone over that.
OK.
The cover-up of the cover-up is not going too well for Labour. This woman knows there was a cover-up, but as a Labour MP, she can't admit it. And that's how we get the situation we do in this interview. This woman completely falls apart under questioning. She has no answer. Looks like she wants the ground to swallow her up and just resorts to silence. Don't think I've ever seen someone look so uncomfortable under questioning. The host is ruthless. She says, "You've just said that and we've already established that is not the case. Labour have nowhere to hide now. We all know if this guy had been white and had a picture of Hitler on his wall, then within hours of the massacre, it would have been all over the media. Neo-Nazi this, far-right that, all accompanied by the immediate release of a photograph of some thuggish-looking white guy in army combats, probably holding some weapon or other. But because the attacker was black African of Rwandan heritage and it just so happened he owned an Al-Qaeda manual, it was covered up. They deliberately hid the description of the attacker. And when they finally did release that information, it was portrayed as a Welsh choir boy, all accompanied by a really old photo of an innocent-looking school kid in a school uniform. These people believe diversity is our strength. Multiculturalism and mass immigration are great. They want to push the narrative that far-right terrorism is the main threat. That's why they'll promote anything that pushes that narrative and suppress anything that undermines it. The liberal media is even trying to say this monster had an obsession with Adolf Hitler. That is the lens they will go to. And let us remember, they covered up the fact Sir David Amess was murdered by an Islamist by saying they didn't want to jeopardize the trial. Yet, after the trial, they were still silent. So it's nothing to do with the trial and everything to do with the reasons I've just outlined. Well done to the interviewer, Kate Burley. Take a watch.
Should the Prime Minister have made people aware that ricin and a terror manual were found in the murderer's home?
I just know Keir Starmer wouldn't have wanted to do anything that could have possibly put a prosecution at risk.
Put a prosecution at risk?
Because, he would, as our country's former DPP, as the most senior prosecutor, he would have taken the judgment based on the possibility of risk to the trial.
How would it have put the trial at risk? I don't get it, because in October, of course, it was announced that he was charged with the ricin in his house and also the terror manual that he'd downloaded. So the details were revealed then, before the trial. So how, obviously it couldn't prejudice the trial.
But politicians' words can have consequences, and I think Keir, as a very senior lawyer, will have taken that judgment.
From the public when it's so important.
If there are questions related to this, we're going to have an inquiry. There'll be full transparency about this, and I understand people's concerns, but the most important thing is that we were able to get some tiny bit of justice for those families. So I'm sure Keir will have taken that judgment.
That's nothing to do with Keir Starmer not telling us that this could well have been a terror incident. It didn't stop him in 2017, for example, when he tweeted about the Finsbury Park bombing and saying then that it was a terror attack.
Well, as I said, I'm sorry to repeat myself, but you have to make these...
The Prime Minister should be telling us what's going on. It's a privilege that he has that job.
Absolutely.
And he should be telling the people of the country what's happening.
I understand that people want to know what's going on, and transparency is really important. That's why we're having an inquiry.
That's nothing to do with the court case, is it?
Well, the point that I've made is that Keir has to take a judgment, as any Prime Minister would do, about the importance of protecting that prosecution.
But it didn't impact the prosecution. We've gone over that.
OK.
Is the scheme to prevent terrorist violence fit for purpose?
Listening to what I've heard that's come out, you've got to have massive questions about what is happening there and how on
Costs
earth...
about 40 million quid a year to run Prevent. Should we have another look at it?
Absolutely. I think we've got to be sure that that scheme is doing the thing that it was set up to do. Clearly, terrorism and the threats... Well, I just listened to what we've heard. You know, as I've said numerous times, we'll have an inquiry, so we'll have more information about what's going on. But we know that terrorism threats and other threats that we face that are very serious are changing all the time. So I think we absolutely need to review it, check that we've got the right powers available, check that we've got the right people doing that work. It's incredibly important, and I think we've absolutely got to look at it.
OK, you mentioned the inquiry again. What are the parameters going to be?
Well, those will be set out very shortly. I'm sure the person who's doing it will lead that independently. As we were saying before, we know that public inquiries can take a long time and they can be very difficult for people to go through. So it's got to be done mindful of the hurt and the suffering that people have already been through.
Do you think that the results of the inquiry will be known during the lifetime of this government?
Well, I'm not going to second guess, but I mean...
Because these questions are just too urgent for it to be lengthy.
I think your question is absolutely right. I don't want to prejudge or to be saying, oh, it should be this length or that length, but your question is absolutely right, because we don't want people to have to go through a lengthy period of giving evidence and so on. You know, I know only too well what that's like, having worked with the Hillsborough families over many years. So you asked the absolutely right question. I just don't want to, give an arbitrary time.
Let me ask it in a different way then. Would you be hopeful that we would know the results of the inquiry during the lifetime of this present government?
I hope it can be as quick as possible, and forgive me, not giving a specific answer to that question, but as I said, I don't want to prejudge what the person independently of government doing the inquiry might say, but I want it to be as quick as humanly possible.
It's good to see you. Thanks very much for joining us.